All right, ladies and gents, what an honor to welcome on the great Joel Klatt. How are you, man? Great to have you here on the Go Along
I'm
Pod.
good. Yeah, Tyler, it's good to chat with you. We were just talking a little bit before we started about our joys of fatherhood with our boys and kiddos. So good to be with you.
Yeah, it's like selfishly, I want to ask how you do it because you're on TV. You've got
Yeah,
the Joel Klatt show. I know you just talked to Kurt Warner on the pod. You're going to be covering the UFL this year, and which by the way, we gotta bust Jim Onus's balls. I'm good friends with the Memphis Showboats GM, so we gotta get a
yeah,
showboat rundown. And in the
yeah.
college football, you're on the draft. You're everywhere, man. So how in the hell have you managed to just balance all the above with three boys?
Yeah, I mean, it helps when you love what you do, so it doesn't always feel like work. And I'm fortunate. I don't feel other than traveling, as much as I do. I feel like because my career is so much different than a normal day-to-day, Monday through Friday job. I get a lot of time with my kids that I think maybe someone in the normal workforce doesn't, get to take them to school, pick them up from school, be around in particular in the off season. I might miss a few Friday nights or a few more Saturdays than the next guy, but trying to balance it with being intentional with the time that I do have with them, I think is important. They're about to get home. It's 3:04 here on the West Coast as we're recording this, and they're going to become storming through the door here in about 15 minutes. So I'm excited about that.
I love it. We're right behind you. Sometimes I have to, have the door locked here in the office because you never know when
Yeah,
Ella or Sonny will come rampaging, and they've made
that's
a few
exactly right.
appearances.
That's exactly right.
Well, let's dive right into the NFL draft first because I know everybody's obsessed with free agency as they should be. It's 24 hours of absolute mayhem, and then slows down to the second wave, then the third wave, and then everybody kind of comes up for air like Jumanji, Robin Williams. What year is it? So by the time
Yeah.
people listen to this, we'll justifiably have our brains wrapped around the draft. But I feel like every year when it comes to the quarterbacks like we hype it up, right? Like, man, like all you see Malik Willis's highlights nonstop, and we start thinking he's going to be a top five pick, and reality just knocks you in the head, and he drops to the third round. So I don't know what to make of these quarterbacks. You've watched Shedeur Sanders, you've watched Cam Ward, maybe my guy Kyle McCord at
Yeah.
Syracuse is in there too. What do you make of the quarterback class? Is it good? Is it not
So
good? If you need a quarterback in the NFL right now?
it's experienced. I think these quarterbacks are incredibly experienced. Um, I think that there is probably a few different guys that could be the next Brock Purdy. I don't think that there's any Josh Allens in this class or Patrick Mahomes, obviously, So are there guys that I think can be like elite level quarterbacks? I don't know. I think maybe Cam and maybe Shedeur can grow into that depending on the fit with their organization and how they continue to mature and grow and develop. But outside of that, there's a ton of guys that have played a lot of football. And I always talk about this when it comes to the draft. This position is so reps dependent and experience dependent. In fact, I have this long exercise. If you go back to when Tom Brady won his first Super Bowl, so basically, 2000, you go all the way back to about 2000. And if you study the guys who have won Super Bowls at the quarterback position, I've done this experiment where I go and look at their college career. It's like, what were they as college quarterbacks? How experienced were they? And what you will find is, on average, those guys all started well over 30 games, attempted nearly 1,000 passes, a lot of them well over 50, 60 touchdowns. And that experience level is something that a 2-year player doesn't really get. He gets into the 20s maybe and starts. And there's a lot of guys. Stafford played a ton of football. There's a lot of guys with a lot of experience. And so this class, while maybe not the flashiest class, could produce someone that down the line is going to win a Super Bowl. And so again, I think that there are more Josh Purdy and Jared Goffs in this draft than there are Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes.
Man, Joel, that's such a great point. Look at last year, right? Jaden Daniels is at Arizona State with Herm Edwards, and
Hmm.
he he moves on to LSU, just a ton of starts. Bo Nix, he played about as long as
Yeah.
Ed Cota was a point guard at North Carolina, right? It
Yeah.
just seems like these guys play forever. But it matters. It's like the old Bill Parcells. Didn't he have that same kind of rule? Like he wanted X amount of starts in college to really believe in a guy in the pros. And I feel like it's kind of coming around to that. We all got hyped up about, like I mentioned, Malik Willis, but Anthony Richardson played 1 year
Hmm.
really at Florida. And now
Yeah.
it's kind of do or die for him in training camp. So you can't
I
just
mean,
play a
remember
bunch of
that
games
that
and be no
happened,
good.
and
But
unfortunately for him, but it happened with Trey Lance. Remember, we had like no film on Trey Lance coming out of North Dakota State, and I mean, tangible the skills were there, but you don't know how they actuate into games, and so that's why. I mean, I can just tell you from firsthand experience, there is no replicating playing in a game for a quarterback. You can't replicate it at all. It's one of the only positions in all of sports that there's nothing you can do on a practice field to actually replicate what it's going to be like during a game. And I think that's why it's so important that these guys have so many starts under their belt.
you're right, because you're gonna see something, register it, throw it in the operating system, and see it again at some point, and maybe you learn
Yeah.
from it. So, like, based on that, who do you think gained the best experience? I mean, maybe it's one of those top two guys, or maybe it's a dark horse. Who do you like into this draft?
Oh gosh. Because of how I couched that first answer, I actually like a lot of these guys because any number of them I think can go and succeed and start at the NFL, in the NFL. Quinn Ewers is one of those guys. I think Will Howard's going to be able to start in the National Football League. I wouldn't put it past Riley Leonard to use his experience to potentially hook on in the NFL. But the two guys at the top for me are Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. And namely, I'm a believer in Shedeur because I saw Colorado before anyone was watching. Everyone is like, yeah, Colorado was okay. And it's like, yeah, but folks, like they were a one-win team prior to him getting there. And the reason they were any good is Shedeur Sanders. We can give all the credit in the world to Deion Sanders and Travis Hunter, but a corner slash wide receiver and a head coach and their impact on a program and namely the wins and losses for the team pale in comparison to the quarterback. So the environment that Shedeur is about to walk into, taking over a team that is not up to par and candidly is going to be less talented than a lot of the teams that they're playing, he's already done that. When that's generally speaking, never the case for a quarterback that's going to get selected in the top 5 or 10 or 15 in the NFL draft. They're generally coming from programs that had a lot of success winning football games, and their talent level is a disparity on the plus side for them as opposed to their opposition versus what Shedeur's was over the last couple of years. So I think Shedeur is going to succeed. I know that people, think he might get in the pocket. They don't like his attitude, so on and so forth. He, for me, is equal parts surgeon and magician. He shows you a little bit of Joe Montana at times. He shows you a little bit of Fran Tarkington at times, buying time. And I hope he succeeds. I think he's very smart, and I hope he succeeds at the next level.
If anybody knows the state of the Colorado football program, it's the voice you're hearing right now. It's Joel Klatt, right? I mean, you were the starting quarterback 03, 04, 05. What
Yeah.
was it really like then? What did the Sanders fam walk into when they took over Colorado?
They took over a program that was irrelevant and destitute. Um, there was nothing going on. Barely had a heartbeat. Barely. I mean, barely. You're talking about a program that had one winning football season for the better part of 20 years. Um, if you were growing up and being recruited to play college football and someone mentioned the name, Colorado, they would have been like, what's going on there? Because in the short period of those players' lives, who are 16, 17, and 18 years old, Colorado had done nothing. I mean, nothing. They had done nothing. So what Deion stepped into and what Shedeur stepped into was a vacuum. And I think Colorado did the right thing in terms of, hey, let's become relevant by handing the keys to someone who can attract attention and be his own gravitational pull. See, normally you're trying to match up, I think at least, in college football, if you're trying to make a hire for a coach, you're trying to match up who best fits what we do, right? And so you're trying to find a guy that has a bit of gravity to him, and you're trying to match it to what gravity you have or equity you have in your program. The problem with Colorado is they had nothing. So they needed a guy that was going to be on his own and immediately a gravitational pull, which is why it was such a smart hire. You can argue with it all you want. If you don't like Deion Sanders' style, that's fine. But what he's done at Colorado, you can't argue with. And their strategy paid off, and it has worked because they walked into a total void as far as success goes. And last year, let's face it, they were playing really meaningful football games late into November as it related to the Big 12 championship as well as the college football playoff. And that's less than 19 games removed from being a one-win team.
Because we're at this point last year, we're talking about Michael Penix turning around Washington, but Washington was a pretty reputable program, before he got there, and comparatively, same with Bo Nix in Oregon, Caleb with USC, Jane Daniels with LSU.
Mm-hmm.
This is a totally different deal with Colorado. So what did Shedeur Sanders do? I mean, what traits does he really possess to have that kind of effect as the quarterback and make this program relevant? Like, what do you think he's doing day to day to change things?
Yeah. So first off is just confidence, so all of a sudden he walked into the locker room and he was like, yeah, hey guys, we're going to be good. And everyone's like, what do you mean? We haven't been good for 20 years. And he's like, yeah, I don't care. I don't care. So there is an air of confidence that I think that you have to have as a quarterback, in particular, if you're going to walk into that setting and turn a culture around. You're going to have to believe when there's not a lot of belief around you. And he certainly believes in himself and in the process. So that's number one. And then when you go onto the field, he's hyper accurate with the football. He throws the most catchable ball of any of the quarterbacks in this draft. And when you actually break down the film, he did it behind a patchwork, paper thin offensive line. And yet he was still putting the ball in the right spots in the right timing. To me, that's surgical. Then he had this amazing ability to extend plays, not necessarily make plays with his legs, but extend plays and give himself an opportunity to impact the game as a passer. That's pretty special. And that's ultimately what he was able to do. He attracted other talent, and then the game was on his shoulder. They weren't running the football, guys. I'm just telling you that right now behind that offensive line. So he understands what it's like to be back there and be the reason that you're either going to win or lose. Because he was certainly in that position last year and even more so the year before.
And you never know what to believe this time of year. But the reports that some teams didn't like his attitude and these 18-minute speed dates at the combine. Do you think there's anything to that? Like, do you think that teams could realistically be turned off by swagger?
And the sky is blue and water is wet. We're always going to hear about what the media deems to be the more polarizing players. This is a rinse and repeat story. It's the laziest story in the draft process. Every single year, we are going to take a player that is a polarizing player. Okay. And on Tuesday or Wednesday, some publication, some guy is going to be like, I heard some of his meetings didn't go great. And everyone's like, oh, really? I knew it. I knew it, because again, it's polarizing. So it's a clickbait story. It's a lazy story. And I'm just telling you right now, you go back in history, you're going to see this story. Go forward in history, and you will see this story. And it just so happens that this year, that story is going to be about Shedeur Sanders. There's plenty of teams that liked him. There's plenty of teams that maybe didn't. And guess what? That's every player. Very rarely do you get every single team being like, oh, yeah, man, that guy was great. That cat was awesome. In particular, when it comes to quarterbacks. And in particular, when it's only one team that really needs it. This is like a house. right? If you don't get the house or you're not in position to buy the house, you're going to be like, that house wasn't good anyways. The location wasn't good. I didn't like the tile in the bathroom. I didn't like, whatever it was, the color of the front door. And guess what? You weren't going to get the house anyways. And the NFL organizations know this. And I'm sorry, I'm going to get like, I get a little fired up because the reporters know this. So they go to some organization that has no chance or directive to draft Shedeur Sanders, and they're like, "What did you think?" And some guy's like, "I didn't really like him," and they're like, boom, story, and it's just it's lazy, it's really terrible, and it happens every year. And these people don't understand that it's like, hey, one, it's probably not true, and two, like, what are we doing?
Man, I respect it. I think that the full portrait of a prospect is important, right? Because it's not all going to be rainbows, puppies, and flowers. Like there's some prospects aren't going to work out, and I think it's good for the fans to hear all sides. But like I'm thinking of Caleb Williams last year. Man, I've talked to people around him, and you're talking about an empathetic leader. He's got emotional intelligence. Teammates loved him, coaches loved him, and even in Chicago, it seems like instantly he kind of had that effect. So you're right; things can get off the rails. And with Shedeur
But
Sanders,
we heard that same exact story about Caleb Williams,
right?
you know, and it's like, well, what is it? What do his teammates say about him? What did his teammates in college say about him, and what will his teammates in the NFL say about him? It's one of the reasons I love the draft because you're seeing the starting line for and the roster compilation, and you're seeing these guys that will be stars in the NFL, and I love that. I despise the combine. I think the combine is awful. I
It
hate it.
is.
I
Oh, it's
hate
all.
it.
You know what? This is the first year I didn't even go to the combines since I started covering the
Mm.
NFL in 2011. It's just become I don't even know what to call it. It's like a bonanza faux convention, just a lot of a lot of nonsense, and you forget the further away you get from the tape too, and the actual substance, and what we saw all fall. The more ridiculous that all this becomes. So last thing on Shedeur though, because I think it's an important note, and you'd probably be able to speak to this better than anybody. The whole Dion angle, like I get it. Dion's got swagger. Dion's got attitude. His dad was his coach,
Hmm.
but his dad was probably hard as hell on him. I mean, that's what you heard too. Like he coached him hard, and he's probably always coached
Yeah,
him hard. Like that can be a positive more than anything. I don't think he was coddled, but you would know better than me.
he definitely wasn't coddled. I mean, he was sacked. I mean, what was it, 90 times in 2 years? And Dion never ran out there and picked him up. He got up every single time. The guy's tough as nails. You can't argue with that. Um, and yeah, I think that the expectation from his coach, in this case, Coach Prime, was excellence at all times and always. And that, let's just say it comes with a price to have that name on your back his whole life. And he's had to be Dion's son his entire life. So every single time he walked out there for a little league game, single time he walked out there for a high school football game, then for a college football game, every single guy put a bullseye on his back because he's Dion's son. It's like, I want to make my mark against that guy. So he has been the target on every field he's been on since he's been stepping on to fields, and he's handled it pretty well, at least in my estimation.
I didn't really think of it like that. You have to have some shit to you if that's your name, and you're going out there at every level, and everybody knows who you are, and the expectations are sky high every second, every play of every game. Yeah, you're not going to be an introvert. If you're an introvert and you're scared of your own shit, you're dead, right? I mean, those
Yeah,
expectations are going to eat you alive. So,
yeah.
yeah, you're going to be at the combine with the hat sideways and going into meetings a certain way. I would think there's a coach out there, a team out there that would appreciate that. I don't. I mean, Brian
There
Dable
will
of the
be.
Giants
There
come to
will
mind. I
be.
could see Dayball loving that.
I think that the Giants are a great landing spot for him. I'll be a bit surprised if they don't take him.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Does he get to three, or do they maybe have to get to two?
Um, They may have to get to two. I just like Cleveland. Who knows, man? Who knows about Cleveland? And if you're Shedeur and Dion, like, do you want to go to Cleveland? If you're putting together a list of like places I may not want to end up, wouldn't Cleveland be on one of beyond that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, maybe paying Miles Garrett and having this Hall of Fame talent, at least in your locker room, it shows them we're not giving up. We want to
Sure,
be relevant. But yeah, it's
sure.
been since 1999, and not much has gone right at the quarterback position. Gosh, let's talk UFL, man. How excited
Yeah.
are you for this season? We've got some real football around the corner. What has you most excited about uh, the UFL under another year here? Things are going strong for this league.
It's a great question because there are a lot of things that I'm excited for. But if I had to boil it down, I've been now part of spring football. This is going to be my fourth year. I did two USFL years, and then the UFL after the merger, USFL and the XFL merged, and last year became the UFL. What I've seen in the three previous seasons is that number one, spring football works. People enjoy it, they like it, and a lot of people watch. It might not be the ratings of the NFL or even maybe major college football, but man, for the spring, it does very well. So this works and it provides an avenue of opportunity for all of these players. That's the second thing that I love. In particular, being a former player myself who was on the bubble. I was
Huh.
just an unsigned, free agent that had to earn my way into New Orleans camp or Detroit camp. And so the opportunity to go out there and put together a film at the professional level, I think is important. And then lastly is that every single year of these first three, the play has gotten better. I thought it took a big jump after the merger last year, and the play got much better and more sustainable last year. And that's only going to continue. I've been talking with some of the people surrounding the league about the scrimmages and some of the practices that we're seeing right now currently as the players and teams prepare for the season. And they're saying, hey, cuts are going to be the hardest that they've ever been. That speaks to the level of play growing. And that's something that I'm really excited for this year because last year to me was a breakthrough in terms of the play, specifically from the quarterback position. And if we continue that going forward, then not only is this league going to be something that, quote, works, but it's going to be sustainable and it's going to be very successful moving forward.
You know what I love too, Joel, is like it's not like the UFL has gone the gimmick route or tried to find like some ridiculous name, some reality TV star that just to get cheap eyeballs. Like I think this has really been building the right way. Just talking to
Yeah.
Jim Bonus about it. I mean, he's been constructing his own team there with the Memphis Showboats, and like
Yeah.
I don't know what goes into the construction of a team and trying to build it meticulously at this level versus maybe, hey, Johnny Manziel, come on in, man.
Yeah.
We want to sell t-shirts.
Yeah. I think that that's been important. I really do. That it has eschewed maybe the like, the short-term success or the short-term uh, gain of maybe some names that aren't as good of players for the quality of play. And maybe in the short term, that's painful, but in the long term, that's going to be much more sustainable. I think one of the big things that has worked for this league is the fact that it's not a gimmick and it actually leans into football. Okay. And let me be more specific. Let me give you an example of that. So if you're into spring football, you probably love the sport a lot, right? And there are millions of Americans that do, and we get close to a million viewers on these games on average. That means, some of them are getting much higher viewership than that. And what we're giving you from a broadcast standpoint is the ability to go deeper into the sport that you love, not just flash you with a name and be like, hey, remember he was great at such and such school or he was a former first round this or that. But rather, we're going to put mics on the coaches. We're going to put mics on the players, not so we can hear them trash talk, although that's entertaining, but we can hear them call the plays. We can hear the interaction of the coaching development. Okay, so at home, what you want from us as broadcasters and the broadcast in general is access and discovery. Access to things and places that you've never had access for, and discovery of things that you don't know yet. And if we can give you that access and discovery, then you're going to have a good time being a part of that telecast. And that's something that the UFL has leaned totally into, and the USL before USFL before that. And giving the football fan, the whole hardcore um, poor college NFL football fan more of what they want from a football perspective, I think has worked, and it's something that I've really enjoyed because my telecast is different than it is in the fall. If in the fall I'm trying to unlock a Rubik's cube and push you forward with the broadcast, in the spring I'm basically a translator, and I'm trying to take what we're hearing and make sure that you understand what you just heard.
You know what it reminds me of? You probably have read this book, Start with Why, with Simon Sinek.
Yeah, yeah, Simon Sinek,
Uh,
he's terrific.
amazing. I just read it a second time, and you just can't get enough. But like, this is what 2010, I think it came out, and he gets into like manipulations and how easy it is to get baited by, okay, 30% off whatever you're selling, or something
Mhm.
cheap, something quick, something that's going to sell and give you a short-term thrill. But you're right, the long-term sustainability is just doing the work, having that why, having a purpose
Yeah.
that's narrow, that's focused. And it seems like that's what the UFL has really done here to last long
Yeah,
term,
so
because a lot of these leagues haven't lasted, but maybe this is how it's going to be different.
for example, those of you that aren't familiar with Start with Why, maybe you quote it all the time on your show, so everyone's like, "Well, this
No,
is
not
redundant."
enough.
But he basically says, um, you know, no one cares or no one buys what you do. They buy or care about why you do it. And he brings up Apple as an example of this, as a company that does a great job of selling their why, and then they just attach a product on the end of it, which is why you'll buy a phone, a laptop, and earbuds, and all of it from Apple because you trust them. And it's like they're not a phone company or a computer company or an earbud company. They're a company that you buy their why. Well, if you were taking that principle, the UFL starts with why. We love football, period. We love everything about football, and we want you to be closer to the sport than you've ever been before. We're going to do that by giving you access through microphones and drones and different types of cameras. And we're going to do that by putting the best possible rosters together and putting on this football game. We're going to do that via spring football. And this is the league that we're going to give you. And that's the arc of what a Simon Sinek would kind of talk about the UFL.
Beautifully put, man. And you're probably doing your research like crazy right now, learning about these teams, learning about these players. Is there a storyline that's kind of captured your eye as you get into this, that maybe a player to
Well,
follow?
I mean, it's hard not to start with Birmingham. If you're unfamiliar with spring football, the Birmingham Stallions have won straight championships. They won the first two USFL championships. Then after the merger, they went ahead and won the first UFL championship. So Skip Holtz, the former La Tech coach, a really incredible coach, has unlocked the code of how to be successful in spring football, and he's done it with different quarterbacks every single year. But they're going for a four-peat. We're talking about how hard it was for the Chiefs to win three. The Stallions are trying to win four in a row, and they're actually bringing back Alex Magoo. And Alex Magoo 2 years ago won a championship for them in the USFL and was the league MVP before he was on the practice squad for the Green Bay Packers for a couple of years. And he's a really good player, and he's coming back to the Stallions and actually going to play for Skip again. He was remarkable and terrific in the last year that he played spring football. So that's one of the storylines that I think, really excited about. And then other than that, you talk about the innovation and whether it was the rules of the kickoff, the way that we bring the mics and the access into your home. And then also, I would just say the Fox has a bit of a different strategy this year in terms of Friday night on broadcast. And what we're doing is we're showcasing Friday night football. We did it in the fall with the Big Ten. We've been doing it all winter with college basketball. But every Friday night, you can count on Fox to bring you not only a marquee matchup within our league partners, but something that's done really well on the broadcast network. So we're going to be most Fridays. I'll be in your TV, in your living room, and we're going to be bringing you UFL football on Friday nights.
Man, I love that. Football on a Friday night in the
There you
spring
go.
here in Western New York. Get your wings. Go to 911
That's
Tavern.
right.
They don't
That's
sponsor
right.
the show. We just love them. and taking some football. Jay Sternberger, former Go Long guest,
Yeah,
he's
he's
still tearing it
back.
up.
He's
Yeah.
been really good. I mean, he has been incredibly good for the Stallions. He's been a dominant force for them for the duration of his time with Skip Holtz. He was an All-American at Texas A&M, third round pick, and he's been really good in spring ball.
And finally, we've got to get a Memphis Showboat prognostication. We're biased, admittedly. We want Monas to go undefeated and take it to
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
they face. But give us a lowdown on this team. What you see in the Showboats.
So Memphis has struggled a little bit, and they 2 years ago, was it 2 years ago, they had a really good start to the year and then kind of struggled down the stretch. And for me, it's primarily about the fact that they haven't been able to get out of this mode where they can take on and beat Birmingham. Birmingham has this like capture over the league, and teams play differently against them because they've been so successful. So from a Memphis standpoint, I think that they've got to look back and they've got to look at their opportunity to beat Birmingham and their matchups with Birmingham. They've had chances. A lot of these games are one possession games, majority of them, and they've got to find a way to win that one play in order to take the next step to beat Birmingham and kind of move forward from that, because right now that's kind of a ceiling over their head.
Well, we can't wait to check it out, Joel. And this was a delight, man. Thanks so much for
Yeah,
hanging out with us. And
you
everybody, make
bet.
sure you listen to the Joel Klatt Show. I imagine it's everywhere you get your finer podcasts,
Yeah.
and check out
I
your
am
stuff at Fox
excited.
Sports.
I should have said this right off the bat. I am excited for Memphis because Ken Wisenhunt's going to be their head coach. So
Oh
he's
yeah.
coming in from the NFL, and Ken Wisenhunt's going to be their head coach. And so I think that that gives them a little bit better perspective, and maybe experience um, uh, to hopefully take that next step.
And if Jim Monas leads them to glory, clearly an NFL team should come knocking. If you turn around those showboats, you
That's right.
deserve to take over
Or
the
a
Browns or
college team,
somebody.
because everyone's hiring GMs in the college
Right.
level. I was going to
Right.
say, or college. You can go be a college GM now these days.
All right. One more question though for you. Syracuse football. Is Syracuse back or not with Fran?
Uh, okay. I loved Syracuse last year. They were really good, really good. Quality wide receivers. Their back was tremendous. What was it? Uh, Lane? Was his last name Lane? Why am I blanking on
Oh,
his name?
Q. Yeah, what a terrible
Anyways,
alum I am
he
now.
was he had like 60 catches. He was at 1,000 yard rushing, and McCord was obviously great at quarterback. Plus, their schedule set up so well for them last year. They missed all the big boys in the ACC. That's the opposite next year, and they're going to have to replace a lot of those key players. If I had to give you a prediction for Syracuse, they may take a small step back, but it's not because Fran's doing anything wrong. It's just that the circumstances around the year are going to be so different, namely because of losing a quarterback in McCord, and secondly, the schedule and how much more difficult it gets as opposed to last year.
Lakeen Allen. That's right. How could I forget?
Yeah, that's it.
And you,
LeQuint Allen.
yes. Yeah. What a man. I don't even. I went to one game, and I think I know everything about Syracuse football. All right. I just an
Yeah, that's
awful
good.
alum. I know
Good for
Aranda
you.
Aranda Gagson's kid was the tight end, right? I want to say Pena was the
That's right.
receiver. So these
He
like
was
college,
good too.
it's got to be hard to analyze college football, right? I mean, with all these transfers all the time.
Yeah, there's just more movement. I tell you what, it makes it harder. It makes it harder this time of year because yeah, I could spend a lot of time on college teams right now, and I watch some film, but that's more to get a feel for a coach and his system, because the rosters are going to change. They're going to change again in the next transfer portal window. So from an actual personnel standpoint, it's really hard to do much work really until the end of that spring portal season.
You find a way though, Joel, with three boys too, who are going to be home very shortly out there on the West Coast if they aren't already.
That's
So
right. That's right. They're downstairs. They're being quiet. I love it.
we've got bedtime here on the East Coast, so I better help with the witching hour. This was great. Thanks so much,
I
man.
love
Really
it.
appreciate all the time.
You bet, Tyler. Yeah, absolutely.